Welcome back to the Top 1%er podcast, where we don't just focus on wealth creation, but living a life by design.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so I got a question. This is something that I've noticed we've had a handful of conversations about, but it seems as though it's a topic on social media. It's just becoming more popular.
Yeah.
And that is the topic of homeschooling your kids, right?
hmm
In the past, homeschooling your kids, I felt like if you did, you were that odd kid.
hmm
Like it was, and I think a lot of the reason why is because they weren't socially together with other people. So their social skills weren't being naturally being developed,
Yeah.
right? I think that's changed quite a bit from way back then until now, especially with me watching you homeschool your kids,
hmm
vacationing with you and your family, and seeing that your kids are not the odd ducks,
Yeah.
right? So tell us, how has that experience been? Maybe give us a couple things that you and your wife have really enjoyed about homeschooling your kids.
I had no idea how hot of a topic this was until I started posting a couple of stories about our experience with homeschool. And there is a network out there that is the Homeschooler Network, and it is massive. It's such a big network. And it's people not only that have chosen to homeschool now, but people thinking about homeschooling their children. The way our family came to this decision obviously started with COVID, right? We were forced to keep our kids at home and do virtual learning, which we didn't love virtual learning because it was just a teacher who's not trained on teaching through a computer was trying to get a course through these kids. Like they didn't know what they're doing. They're trying to
Yeah.
figure it out on the fly. And I didn't feel like my kids got a lot from it. So I was kind of forced as a dad and my wife as well. She's been incredible through this to take on our own home education, right? In-home education, more so than just homeschool. But man, what are our kids actually learning from this teacher right now? Which wasn't much, right? Maybe the math and the reading and the writing my kids needed from that teacher and the basics. But other than that, like they were keeping them on the computer for 5, 6, 7 hours, and they were teaching them about stuff that they would never use in real life.
Okay.
Like, why are my kids learning this for an hour? Like I've never thought about this since second grade. Like,
I
why
feel like
would
your eyes, it's hard to actually know what your kids are learning
yes,
until
until they
COVID,
were in home with
because
us learning this? Yes.
yeah, you were there, you're listening to it. Well, for parents who, aren't gone all day, but you were able to listen and see what are my kids actually learning.
Yes.
And that it sounds like that's what kind of led you to this.
It felt like my kids were being taught subjects to fill time, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah, yeah,
fill up
yeah.
time.
That's like
Like
having meetings at work just to have meetings at work.
100%. And then COVID was over. We started sending our kids back to school, and the mask thing and all that kind of stuff was going on. And we already just didn't feel great about sending our kids back to school with everything that was going on. And all this school system stuff started happening with different agendas and weird books being in the library and really not really knowing exactly what my kids are being taught anymore and what the political agenda is of that teacher that is teaching my children. And so we started just researching the idea of homeschool. Like, what if we actually pulled our kids out of school this year and we homeschooled them? Like, did a homeschool program, not a virtual learning program, but homeschool, right? And we started looking at these different curriculums that you can do. And we loved a couple things of homeschool right off the bat. Number one, my work schedule is flexible. I own my own business, my own sales organization, to where I can take my kids on a vacation if I want to. I can go to our cabin and visit if I want to. But the school system won't allow that. They won't allow me to take my kids and go on a vacation. I didn't like the flexibility of time that I did not have with my children. If I wanted to take them on 2 vacations or 3 vacations this year, that I couldn't. So that was number one. I didn't like that. Number two, I didn't like that I didn't know what my kids were learning. I didn't know if it was good information or subjects that they really need in life, or if there's just a paid teacher that is there with 30 students that is going to get really 15 minutes of FaceTime with my child to really influence them and build them up and help them through learn a certain subject. But how much of that is just filler time, right? And how much of it is just we need to feed them, we need to send them to PE, we need to send them to music to bang on a drum for a minute, and
Yeah.
it's just filler time. Where if you look at it, my kids already after school are very, very active kids. They're
Hmm.
all in baseball and they're all in my son's in baseball and football and basketball like year round. My daughters are in cheer and gymnastics, and that takes so much time. So already we weren't seeing our kids a ton because they were at school for 8 hours of the day. Then they're in their after school programs for 2 or 3 hours a day. And then we get them home for maybe an hour or two of quality time before we have to get them ready for bed and send them off to school again at 7 in the morning the next day. Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't love that. I didn't love that I wasn't getting that time with my kids. And so as we started breaking it down, we realized that by having them home, I could teach them subjects that I control. I know I can find a curriculum. The curriculum we chose to use is the good and the beautiful. And it's a math, reading, and writing curriculum. And when they're doing math, reading, and writing, we converted a bedroom into a classroom. Like we built built-ins and made it feel like a classroom. And now either my wife, which is usually her, and sometimes me if I can stay home and help, we're getting one-on-one time with our children. We're helping them learn reading, writing, and math. And we're getting FaceTime with our kids and helping them go through this. And that's what we did all of last year is we helped them through their textbooks. It took about an hour, maybe an hour and a half for them to go through reading, writing, and math. And they got personal one-on-one development in those subjects. And then we'd do like little book reports, like, hey, you need to go read this book and give us a report at the end of the week. Or we'd do typing classes. We'd make them fill up their schedule about 2.5 hours of actual schoolwork that we controlled and knew that they'd enjoy learning.
2.5 hours a day.
2.5 hours a day.
So you're able to teach your kids what probably needs to be taught in
Hmm.
2.5 hours versus what, 6 hours?
Yeah, and it's
Seven?
7 hours. And
Seven?
it's 2.5 hours of FaceTime with your children, teaching them subjects that we know they're going to use in life, right? Eventually they'll use it. They'll use these math, they'll use this reading and writing, they'll use this typing class, they'll use these online, games or whatever, like it'll benefit them in life. But then on Fridays, we would put away the curriculum and we would work on real life lessons. Like I would take my kids to grocery shop. Hey, we need to go grocery shopping today. We need cereal. We need this and this. You have a budget of $100 for your list. You have a budget of $100 for your list. And my kids would go and they'd pick up the certain cereal boxes and brands, and they'd be like, holy cow, this is $7, or I can get this off brand for $3. Like, yep, let's get off brand. And they would start making these choices with money, and they would realize how fast that money goes if you buy certain brands and how fast that money goes if you go these brands. And then we'd also identify things like the healthy food is very expensive and the unhealthy food is very cheap. Why is that, right? Why do they do this? And we talked about these just lessons that if you want to eat high quality foods and healthy foods, it's expensive. And make sure my kids understand the stuff that's good for you is organic and is very expensive. And we'd break this down to our kids and teach them while we're out there in the real world. You
Can I
know,
just say, I don't know why after listening to that, I was like fully engaged. I don't know why anyone would want to do anything other than homeschool, myself included. I
well,
mean, I know it's hard for, if parents both work, that might be
yeah,
not
not everybody
possible or
can do it
anything, but
because
I
of that.
think there's some limitations to it.
Yeah.
But listening to you for the past few minutes on this, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the way you're doing it anyways,
Yeah.
that is exactly how I think it should be done. That's
Yep.
awesome.
So Friday we try to get really creative on a life lesson. But after, like, my son will get up and he knows that if he's done with his school, he gets done with his requirements through us, like after school, they have to do 30 minutes of piano. So we bought a piano and started doing piano during COVID. Okay. So we got a piano. They started taking piano lessons. They have to do 30 minutes of piano every day, and which they love now. They didn't love at the beginning, but they love now. They're 3 years into it. And then they have to do 20 minutes of reading. So they actually have to go read a book and, sit down and read. And then we make them have forced outside time. Like they have to have an hour of outside time. And they usually will play basketball, get super creative before they can have just like downtime, you time. So we plan out their mornings. Like their mornings are pretty filled. After that, we try to give them an edge on other kids because they're in sports. So where can my son have an edge? My son can go have private baseball lessons while your kids are at school. My son can have one-on-one time with mom or dad or sister to go play extra sports outside while your kids are at school. And then they go to baseball practice after football practice. My daughters get private dance lessons or whatever while your kids are at school. So we give them an edge up on life and just giving them this extra time to work on their habits and their hobbies. But then we talked about that social aspect. Like so many people, that's like their biggest fear is this social aspect of your children. My kids are so involved with other kids with these after school programs and friends that they're making. And we make sure they have a lot of play dates and kids over to our house, and they go over to their buddies' houses all the time. They earn that time on Friday and Saturday that like, hey, you can have play dates the whole time with whatever buddies you want to do. We give them that extra time of play dates and in school and that kind of stuff. I do not worry about my kids' social skills and surviving the real world because they are getting it through coaches and through peers, on in the sports element and with dance and that kind of stuff. They're getting plenty of that.
There's no question whether they are or not, because the time that my kids have spent with your kids, and there's no question whether they are social or not,
Yeah.
right? They're very social. They're very active. They want to get out and do things. Um, yeah, that's incredible. I don't know that. I mean, there might be better ways to homeschool your kids, but I think you're nailing it.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be homeschool. I think the biggest thing to take away from what I've learned, I don't know how long homeschool will last in our home, right? Like my daughter, by the time she gets to high school, might be like, I want to go to high school and be with my friends. And I'm going to let her do that. Like we've already talked to our kids that if they want to go to dances and they want to go be part of the school, that's fine. Like I'm not trying to shelter my kids
Yeah,
from that.
I think that's an important part too. So I think that's
hmm
great.
I feel like in their developmental years though, right now, elementary school and junior high school or middle school, like I want to, if somebody's going to be influencing their lives, I'm going to send them to school 1,000 hours a year to develop them in their developmental stages of life where they're creating their identity and who they are and what life's about and that kind of stuff, where they're just molding whatever they're taking in. I want to be the one that develops that. I want to be the one that teaches them about politics and teaches them about money and teaches them about religion and teaches them about this stuff. I want to be the one that shapes them and molds them into their foundation. And once they're 15, 16 and they have that foundation, I do not worry about them going
Right.
to school.
Yeah.
And nobody else is going to be influencing them more than what mom and dad can influence them, right? And what I've created, for my kids and their foundation. But I feel like this all goes back to not everybody can homeschool, not everybody will homeschool, but I feel like it comes back in understanding what the goal and purpose of the education system is. When Rockefeller created the public education system back in the day, right? When industrial workers were needed in this country was ran off of the industrial workers, right? And they needed mom and dad to work. And so there was nowhere for students to kids to go, right? Because our forefathers didn't have school systems. They learned reading, writing, and creativity in the home. They learned how to do these things in the home, and they created incredible leaders. They created incredible people through those lessons that they got in home, right? And then Rockefeller created the public education system, and where they wanted to not only allow mom and dads to go to work and to work in the factories, but a place where kids can go for 8 hours so mom and dad could go to work.
Hmm.
So they had to create this public education system where they eventually controlled the education that our children are getting. And the purpose of this education system was not for them to become Rockefellers and to become business owners and real estate gurus. It was for them to become good employees,
Industrial workers, right? Because at the
industrial
time,
workers
that's what they were
like
doing. Yeah.
mom and dad.
Yeah.
Like, let's teach them to obey rules, to show up on time, and to be good industrial workers. So when they get out of high school, they can go work in our factories, just like mom and dad does, right? And so they built the education system to build good employees. That education system has never changed, ever. Like, it's always been designed to create good employees. They don't talk about entrepreneurship. They don't talk about real estate. They don't talk about investing. They don't talk about credit, building credit. They don't talk about lines of credit. They don't talk about the financial system. They don't talk about banking systems. We don't get this education in our school systems on purpose. It is not by accident that they don't have this in there. So I feel like if my kids are going to go back to school, I am not going to be naive to that is vital information that they need and they will not get it at school. It is my duty as a parent to get them that information at home when they're in their developmental years. And that is really all of that information needs to be developed. I would feel like in early teens through 18 before they go out into the real world, that they have a solid foundation of these things, right?
Yeah.
Money, politics, religion, sex, everything. Like these are conversations we need to have in our homes
Yeah.
where we build their foundation so they know who they are, what we believe in, and what is the core of our values before they go out and they get to go make their own choices and decisions without supervision, right?
Yeah.
Where they're out in the real world. And so even after homeschool ends, or if they choose to go back to school, I'm going to make sure that my children have a program and that they have an education system at home where I'm teaching them these things, and we're developing our children so that they can be producers in this world and not just good employees. Like I want so much more for my children.
I think that there's going to be a lot of questions and people wondering how you did it. Like what is that education program? I'd say,
Hmm.
that you met. And so, please ask those questions. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, um, then go over to our YouTube or Instagram and comment and ask those questions, because we want to get those answers to you. There's no better person than to get homeschooling answers than this guy right here who's been doing it for as long as he has. So
We're learning it.
yeah, tune in next time. We'll get some more good nuggets for you.
Thank you.